Rebecca Martin, and I'm the organizer of the Chicago Film Lover Exchange. Today we're talking about Holy Motors, directed by Leos Carax, came out 2012. And today we have members of the Chicago Film Lover Exchange that are going to be a part of this discussion. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Covey.
I'm Al Pikuski.
Hi, I'm Rohit Agarwal.
Hi, I'm Jeff Breitman.
Hi, I'm Nancy Bishop.
Holy Motors is an amazing film for so many reasons, and I'm going to let our group talk about their first impressions of what makes this movie so great.
My first impression of it I heard it was starting to get a really good reputation at the Cannes Film Fest. When I first saw it, I heard about how weird it was, but as the movie went on, it turned out that it's actually really straightforward, because it relates to a guy who just has a really lousy day at his job, and he has a lot of different things that he has to take care of. And it turns out the thing that he has to take care of, it may look a little crazy here and maybe a little weird there, but it's stuff that anyone can relate to, because you've had days where you've had things that are totally crazy and unexpected.
I think that the film is really interesting because it's completely open to interpretation. I think it's very open to individual interpretation and perceptions of what they're really seeing. For me, I found it very perplexing and very confusing. I kind of realized something about myself, that I like a linear narrative, or not necessarily linear, but something that kind of makes sense. So for me, first watching it, it was very kind of frustrating because I found so many components of it really confusing. So it made me realize something about myself, but I think the beauty of the film is it's very open to individual interpretation.
I totally agree with Rebecca. I felt exactly the same way that you did, although from the exact opposite perspective, because I love non-linear, experimental, kind of unusually structured films. They're totally in my wheelhouse, and Holy Motors hit all of the sweet spots of those kinds of cinema that really don't get a lot of play outside of small art house cinemas, and I think it does a tremendous job of being surreal and intellectual, but also just entertaining. And that's one of the things that I love about it. Even if you don't really know what's happening from scene to scene, each individual scene is fascinating to watch. Yeah. So if you can...
it makes sense within its own kind of bubble.
Right, yeah. So you have these little self-contained stories, almost as if the film is sketches. 9 or 10 ideas of films that are kind of sewn together by this plot of Monsieur Oscar going through his day.
Yeah. Well, you could look at it as the various roles we play in life. People play all different roles. But it is weirdly, that was my first impression, was just totally weirdly beautiful and poetic. And also I believe he has some aversion to modernity. And Carax has talked about that. He doesn't like digital filmmaking and so forth. So it's he's taking that aversion to modernity and showing it in a very poetic way, with the very poetic images that he uses.
Yeah, my first thoughts are really in line with everybody else. So I thought it was just a wonderful homage to film, and I see it more as an anthology collection of 10 shorts. There's actually 10 little segments in the film, and I thought they were all interesting from a visual perspective first time I saw it. But then on multiple viewings, I kind of got into the layers of how everything's kind of interrelated, and how it's not just really segments in the film, and I thought they were all interesting from a visual perspective first time I saw it. So little clips, but I thought they were all interrelated to this one character, but it's also supposed to be talking about kind of a larger message on society and film, and our view of film and our view of life, and how this actor is kind of playing multiple parts. But is he an actor, or is he somebody else? Is it reality? Is it not reality? That's kind of the surrealistic element of the film, and I thought it is interesting just to dissect the different layers in the movie.
Yeah, I definitely got that. I think it is about film history and different types of film, digital, hark back to the very start of cinematography. I also think I think it's very rich and layered, and I think it's also about the director's his own personal experience. I think that I started to see it as almost like his dream or his subconsciousness, and I read a little about the director personally, and there's some things happened in his life that I could kind of like see in the film once I had that knowledge. So I think that, as I said earlier, it's very open to interpretation, but I think it's very rich and has many layers. So
Definitely.
Yeah.
And speaking of layers, I wanted to talk about the audience. This was actually a question that Al had sent me prior to this discussion about who do you think Carax considers the audience? Is it the people who are in the theater, the people who are watching the film, like us watching it, or is it? I mean, I think there's probably a lot of different interpretations of what an audience is, considering we start with the old man watching the audience, and then the audience watching the film, and then we start watching the film with the audience, and there's a lot of layers there. So I think that's what we should definitely talk about.
Given the things he has said about his views of filmmaking today, I think it's obvious that one of his audience is the film world, film critics, filmmakers. He's talking to them about what he thinks of filmmaking today. But of course it's also the audience, it's us. Yes, I want to be part of an audience that sees surreal films like this.
Definitely.
I think these shots of the audience at the beginning is like a perfect microcosm of the film itself, because the image of the audience can be interpreted in multiple ways. Like personally, I saw the audience as being all asleep, because they're sort of in silhouette and in shadow, and it appeared to me, when I've seen the film 3 times now, but it appeared to
hypnotized.
It appeared to me that they're like slumped in their chairs or asleep, as if the film we watch, Holy Motors, is the collective dream of the audience in the theater. So
even that image of the audience, like you've seen that image like 1,000 times of like audience members in the cinema. Like I just feel like it's said a lot about, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I feel like that image has been shown many times before. I feel like that's like happens a lot in his film.
Yeah, there's an iconic aspect to it, and the film itself has what I call a dream logic, where things break the laws of physics, but it makes sense in the universe. There are several moments where very strange things happen that are unexplained. One that comes to mind right away is in the scene towards the middle where he's an assassin who's coming to stab someone. He rounds a corner and the camera slowly pans and follows him around the corner. But when the camera gets to the corner, he's not walking anymore. He's disappeared.
Yes, right. That's very odd.
Yeah, really, it's a very strange.
Doesn't it feel so familiar?
Yeah.
So I think it's a lot. I think he's really exploring like audiences' subconscious. Like it makes sense. It feels familiar, but then it doesn't make sense when you really kind of like break it down. I think he's very deep intellectual, and you don't necessarily realize that upon the first viewing, but. I think it makes sense.
What do you think, Al?
My impressions on the audience question are like quite a bit different from what Jeff was mentioning. In that like I think that the audience in the beginning, to me, is kind of like the cynical version of what like Carax thinks an audience is, especially maybe a festival audience.
Yeah.
The kind of sense of like perhaps hipsters at a rock show that are too cool to go and express any sort of enthusiasm towards what they do. They're just going to be these emotionless, unmoving silhouettes, and those are the kind of like the shadow people that Carax thinks that too often a movie audience is, and it's contrasted within my favorite section of the movie, which is the musical interlude. My favorite image in the entire movie is when they're playing the musical interlude. Starts with one single accordion. The more curves they take, like the more musicians, the more people join in on this guy's story and the song that this guy wants to play. But then he gives a pause, and then you have a shot, which is like half in shadow and half out of focus, as all the musicians are like waiting. They have these smiles on their faces,
yeah.
and they're just in anticipation of what the next chord is going to be. And I think, like, especially in the context of a group called the Chicago Film Lovers Exchange, that's kind of the way that Carax, and definitely how I would like to approach films. When you're in the presence of a really magnificent, transcendent film, whether it's like a Pulp Fiction or a Fight Club, or I would even argue for Holy Motors, I feel you can get to a place where you don't know what's going to happen next, but you're completely fine with it because you know it's going to be awesome. And that is captured in that image for me, and that's what I think is the great contrast to the big silhouetted audience you see at the beginning.
It's really more of the director's cynical view on people as a whole, and also the audience watching the film. And I can go through a few other key scenes in the movie that are kind of similar to that sequence you pointed out. So at the end, when the actor is going home, and he goes home, and it's supposedly another scene in the film, but his family is this family of chimps and apes, and I think it's kind of another cynical view about how his work is viewed, and how kind of maybe how he can relate to other people because of the kind of work that he does as an actor. But
yes.
It's fascinating to me that you two see that as cynical, because I see it as kind of joyous and maybe tongue-in-cheek comical, and I think that's a testament to the power of the imagery of the film, is that it can be interpreted multiple ways.
Well, think of the comparison between the two homes. You know, the home that the banker character leaves at the very beginning is very modern, like it looks like a Corbusier house, or something in Mr. Hulot's Holiday, I think. A very modern house. He's dressed like a banker. He has children. They say, "Bye, Daddy."
Yet there's something sinister, because there are men with machine
There are men with
guns up
machine
on
guns up on the roof,
parapets.
right? But think of that. So it's machine guns because they're protecting him. That's what I took that.
And yet
to
it's
mean.
very
But anyway.
nautical, because you start with the shot of the child looking out through this circular window,
Yes.
like it's a porthole.
Exactly.
And it's also isolated out in an area, whereas the home that he arrives at the end of the movie is one of a row of these identical houses.
Right.
Track houses,
But that's
yes.
homey. That's a fuzzy, warm and fuzzy kind of home, even if they are chimps.
Yeah,
That's why
and-
he goes
Yeah.
in. You know, he's not wearing a suit anymore. He's very casual. He takes his jacket off when he comes in. And, you know, he's happy to see his family.
You know,
Isn't that still a appointment?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
very much make the argument that we are making an assumption without a lot of evidence that is his home.
Oh, no.
The same way that when he, in the middle of the film, goes and picks up a girl who apparently is his daughter, is that an assignment, or is that a break from his routine that Mr. Oscar
assignment.
is
I mean,
doing?
it's an
You could
appointment,
They're all
yeah.
assignments.
I
I would
think-
argue they're all...
Even when he goes home at the end.
They're
The
all
only
different,
one,
yes.
The only
Yes.
one that I think maybe was with Eva Grace when they do the musical part. Like, they must have had some history together. I mean,
Well, that's hinted at in their dialogue. But
Right.
that's just part of that assignment. By the way,
Yeah.
that's my favorite, visually my favorite scene.
Right.
Because it's set in this beautiful old decayed department store, La Samaritaine in Paris, which has been opened in like, I think 1869. So it's a beautiful old store with like Art Nouveau type
Right.
railings on the stairs and everything. It's in total decay now. It's being turned into, according to the script anyway, into a luxury hotel. But it's so gorgeously, messily
oh yeah.
bizarre and
Yeah.
beautiful. So they walk through models, parts, and up that beautiful staircase. So I think that's a lovely, visually
And
a lovely
I guess
setting.
that could go into a question that I have. We suspend a lot of disbelief in this film, like constantly. Like
Totally.
it's just like a ride that you're like, okay, I'm just gonna keep believing what I see. You know, I'm not gonna ask any questions. It's just this. I'm gonna watch this old lady like inch her way in the middle of the street like it's normal with all these henchmen around her, and then
Yes.
and then I'm gonna watch him do all these acrobatics in his like alien cartoon type deal, which I think was awesome, by the way. I really like that part.
I think that I'm taking, I've got a few things I'm sort of like thinking on. Like, I think that my own mind, I know how my own mind works, and I try to make sense of the story. So I think we are almost like assuming that the banker at the start, that's really him. What if that's an appointment too? And that he's only himself when he's in the car? Because to me, that he only seems to be himself when he's in the car preparing for an appointment. What if from the very start of the film, they're all appointments, like the banker with the machine guns, or like the politician, whatever he could be. So it's making me realise that we try to find sense, or I at least try to find sense in the story where really there is no sense.
Well,
from each individual appointment.
Right, the car. That's an interesting point about is when the driver leaves to go home, she puts on a mask.
So, and that's in reference to a film she did in the 60s.
Yes, Eyes Without a Face.
Yeah, and I also had another point. The audience members at the start in the cinema, what they are watching, I read about this, is they're viewing images by an early pioneer of cinematography.
I thought it was...
Etienne Jules Mari, I think his name is.
Oh.
And it was one of the first films ever, The Man with the Rope or The Naked
So those
Man.
are those little parts that they
Oh,
He
right,
actually does
that's right.
reference film history. Yeah, there's little snippets.
The snippet, and you see those at the end too.
Yeah, so
I think those are from that experiment by the French scientist who did a lot of experiments that helped the development of cinematography.
Yeah. And I found the musical interlude kind of interesting because, you used to go to the cinema, you used to have a intermission, some kind of interlude, and now that's kind of not done so much, but
it's a palate cleanser,
Yeah, I think he references, maybe how he grew up watching film or how it used to be. I think that's one aspect of a very large, intricate kind of project.
But I think it's really interesting thinking of him as he is real when he's in the car.
That's the only way now I see him real.
And an interesting part is, when his boss is in the limo talking to him, and they talk, he's like giving him, I don't want to say, he's giving him crap, I'm sorry, that's the only word I can think of, because he's not performing as well as he used to do, and it's not as beautiful as I don't know, but anyways, what I liked, what they were talking about is beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and to the boss, he wasn't doing 100% or whatever, but to Mr. Oscar, he kept saying the beauty is in the act. That's why I do it, and that is why. So that's what I thought that was interesting. So that's kind of like the heart of what he does. That's like the realness, and it was cool to hear that.
When you guys are pointing out how maybe the only reality is within the confines of that car, that you don't actually particularly see his boss get in or get out. And especially since he's kind of been dragged into the car by the chauffeur. So he's just kind of there, and then he's just kind of there, and then he's not. But in terms of I think in terms of presenting beauty in the eye of the beholder, I think that's one of the most amazing aspects of the movie because it's when you watch a film, watch a film that compels you and you enjoy. It can be on a subject that if you think about it just makes almost no sense, stuff like involving space battles or transforming robots or wizards or historical periods that you were never ever familiar with, and there's something about the magic of film that lets you get into that. And what I think the Holy Motors does really spectacularly well is it goes and gives you a scene and gives you the time to get involved in whatever drama or special effects movie that you're in, and then it allows you to take a step back to go and give you a full appreciation for it. And I think like any really great work of art, it can actually go and change. A great work of art can change your perspective after you've seen it. And I think that Holy Motors is able to do that for movies, for all movies in general. It gives people an appreciation for how movies can transport you to a different place and help you feel for a different character. And specifically for how the performer, the sacrifices a performer has to make, maybe even with his own identity, to be able to do that.
I thought that sentence, though, that you Beckett, I think, just quoted, the beauty is in the act. I think that maybe is the meaning of the whole film.
Yeah, definitely.
I thought that was just perfect.
I kind of wanted to talk a little about, I think something really poignant for me was Mr. Murd with
Yes.
Mendes' character. I think
Yes.
it's KM.
KM.
Yeah.
I could not stop thinking about it. Reminded me of Godzilla, the way he like takes her, and
Interesting.
that's as soon as that was in my head, that's all I could kind of think about. And watching it again, I thought, yeah, this really is like Godzilla.
He is
The
green and
monster
scaly
takes the
for sure.
beauty. Yeah, he kind of dresses her up in almost like a kind of
Burqa.
Like a burqa, yes.
which made me think a lot about the beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
And
I thought that challenged
also, something interesting that I don't know if you guys know this, I think I've mentioned this in past discussions, but in Paris now, no women can wear like burqas. Like,
They have
it's
a law
not-
against it, yes.
Yeah, they have a law against
That's
it.
very controversial.
Yes. So I thought it was
Politically.
interesting that they did that, like in the underground.
And she also seems kind of like, I wouldn't say perfectly fine with it, but towards the end of that scene, she's singing him to sleep.
Right.
She makes no
kind of
objections
almost
to being carted off through the
she's
sewer.
kind of
Right.
frightened.
Well, she's a supermodel, so she's an object in a
Right.
sense. She has no emotional reaction to anything
Right.
that happens.
And nobody, when he took her, attempted to really help. The photographer just continued to snap pictures.
Yeah,
So,
and there's that scene with the photographer is probably one of my favorites in the entire film. It subverts so many aspects of reality. You don't know if this is an assignment that Mr. Oscar is going on. Is this happening? You see, the photographer and all the people in the crowd reacting to him, but Mr. Oscar actually takes the assistant's hand and bites off her fingers, and they're spouting blood like it's Friday the 13th, and she's screaming in pain, and then he goes and he licks Eva Mendes's armpit and takes her
Totally normal.
to his sewer,
I'm going
with
with
the
it.
photographer, and he could be making a statement about the fashion world, about like the ideas like photo shoots that glamorize suicide or heroin
Right.
or all sorts of things that the fashion industry does to be
right.
edgy, and
He could be making a statement about media, like people sitting back and just filming things rather than intervention. Like,
Yeah.
it's
If
really
anything,
powerful.
if anything, in 2014, his attitude isn't cynical enough because they don't have people running after him taking selfies of the.
Yeah.
Well, there's one more thing about that
sorry,
scene, though, I just wanted to
Pause
mention.
for a second. You haven't said anything in a while. I wanted you to say something.
Well, I had a few points to make actually.
Yeah,
So
go for it.
I kind of agree with the interpretation that this whole film is really, every sequence is really part of the film and it's part of his act. But things I don't understand in terms of the reality breakdown is that there's sequences where he's injured. I think that the whole bank sequence is actually 3 short sequences in the film that relate to the bank opening. And in one scene he's actually injured, and when he goes off camera, the driver is still helping him. So I'm wondering, where's that reality breakdown? Is that really part of the film, or did he actually get shot?
I think
There's another scene with the stabbing as well, where he stabbed himself. And I think a lot of these sequences go back to the director himself, because if you look at his name, it's an anagram. So the name Alex Oscar is actually an anagram for his name, Leo Carax, which is also a student. It's not his real name. It's a name he adopted. And a lot of the characters are also read that they're in previous films of his. So when he shot a sequence for the anthology film Tokyo, that the Mr. Shit character is actually a character from that film that he adapted. And the main actor in this film has also been in every single one of his films. There's kind of like his own life in this film, even though it's an ode to cinema, and a lot of the sequences you can interpret it any way you want. I think a lot of ways are kind of going a little bit too deep, and I think a lot of it's kind of more simple. It's more just kind of what his life is on film, or what there's a sequence with the old lady in the beginning, the first sequence. This actually, I read an interview that's really just what he wanted to do, because he saw an old woman on the street.
I read that too.
Who was a beggar, and he wanted to he was imagined how it would be to be her in her shoes, and he wanted to film that. So I think a lot of it's just kind of his own mind.
He wanted to represent that, but he wasn't sure how to.
Right.
And also with, so that kind of goes back to what I was thinking. It's kind of like the director's subconscious. I don't know if he's making it for any audience. I think he just makes it for himself. But also Kylie Minogue, I can't remember her character's name, but when she jumps.
Eva Grace.
So his wife in real life actually committed suicide. So I think a lot of what he puts into his film is just his personal experience, almost portrayed in a
It's
subconscious.
dedicated to her at the end.
Yeah, subconscious dreamlike kind of way.
I was just gonna ask what you guys thought is the like strongest relationship, like the one relationship that you most identified with. Like for me, it was the father and the daughter. Just like that whole conversation that was going on in the car. Like for one, because you know that he's playing a part with this daughter, but he's saying he's so disappointed that she wasn't herself and why she had to lie to him about being like the party girl, and he was just so disappointed. But this last time watching Holy Motors, I noticed that he was actually kind of almost talking to himself. Like he was talking to the daughter, but I could see like he was kind of like disappointed, not disappointed in himself, but you know, he's lying too. So there's like a whole dynamic. But anyways, the relationship seemed pretty strong with the daughter. She was devastated that he knew that she was lying. So I really got a strong reaction out of that. So I don't know if you guys have a part in the film where you feel that strong connection.
I would say there's several of those scenes in the film that I feel a strong connection to, but those are really in the context of the films he's making. So the daughter and him, and also when he's dying, and his former love interest is helping him, and he dies on the bed, and also the last scene where the woman commits suicide, and she's an actress as well, that you kind of hint that they have something going on outside that film, or in the past. But I think the strongest non-film kind of relationship is between himself and his driver Celine, because that's the only one who really understands him outside the film context. And then the influence, or the strongest one I would say, is between him and the audience. And because I feel like the audience kind of, even though they're portrayed as being asleep in the beginning of the film, I feel like in a way that he only connects with these people outside of, because most of his life he's kind of portraying different characters. So I feel like he kind of connects with the people who are watching his films, even though he's kind of anonymous. He doesn't know who they are. So maybe in a more like a spiritual sense, but I think in the real context outside the film would be between him and Celine.
And Celine was very strong. She obviously cares for him, takes care of him, is concerned whether he's eaten or not. Is he tired? No.
And does that go along with, like, you said spiritual, holy motors? It's almost like his protector is Celine in that limo. Like, kind of like a guardian angel type deal.
She also rescues him, or rescues when he's like dying. Or
There's it reminds me of.
Fed. Sorry.
That's right. That's right. There's it reminds me of a really wonderful film called Wings of Desire by
Yes,
Wenders.
God, do I love that movie.
Right, and I mean, right, for those who don't know, it's about angels who are overlooking Berlin, and they can't fully have the full experiences that humans can.
More profoundly, it's about an angel who wants to become a human, who becomes a human, so he can feel emotions because he falls in love.
I have to watch.
It is such a great film.
Right, all those things that Mr. Oscar has succumbs to in the course of having to do an incredibly long day's work, which, by the way, any job where you have to die 3 times is a really, really tough week. Okay, yeah, that's overtime. But he gets killed. He has a death sequence. He has to eat, like he's smoking up a storm. Celine does none of these things. She is like, it could be that Oscar is the mechanism that like you can get a human experience that the drivers and the owners of this particular spiritual car company are hired and employed to do.
Right.
Well, there's a quote from Carax in I'm not sure it was an interview, I think it was in the press kit, but he talks about the cars being both showy and tacky, like a whore's hotel, he calls it. But he says that it's like a form of science fiction in which humans, beasts, and machines are on the verge of extinction. That's what he's talking about here. They're sacred motors. They're linked together by a common fate and solidarity. I'm reading now, of course. Slaves to a virtual world. And it's a world from which visible machines and human beings are disappearing. So I think that's what he meant by the sacred or holy part of it.
Yeah.
There's a really cute moment, almost halfway through the film, which leads to that idea of like both like authenticity and like and how film like interprets stuff visually. It's where Oscar's had a particularly trying moment, and then Celine opens up the little display and says, "Hey, doesn't Paris look really nice?"
Yes,
and then you
that's
show Paris, and then it switches to some infrared, which wouldn't be out of place if the Terminator was watching.
It's like night vision, isn't it?
Exactly.
Night vision
Right. It's this hideous like security camera footage.
Yeah.
And it led me to wonder like maybe that's the way these people in this particular situation, these guys are viewing it. And the rich, colorful world that we see for the rest of the movie is an illusion, which of course, if you want to get technical, it kind of is, right? But yet it's the one we more buy into than the surveillance world that he's looking at.
Definitely.
I mean, I would like to add that my favorite scene in terms of the level of authenticity, what is the most real to me was the deathbed sequence. And not only because I think it was both characters were tremendously honest on their own terms, and I was able to buy into that particular like sad story without even hearing all the background details. But even more importantly, when he's done, he gets up out of his death state and almost walks off. But then he comes back to go and ask her for her name.
Right.
And then it gets her name and then thanks her. And then at that moment we realize that she's also been a player on this particular stage.
Right.
In fact, she says she has to go to her next appointment.
Yes. And that thankfulness is one of the most honest things that I think he values, and one of the reasons why he dislikes what happens to his daughter in that earlier sequence is because she didn't complete the act. Maybe she wasn't such an easygoing girl naturally, but to him it's like you have to dive in, you have to go and participate in that moment if you're over there in the moment already. And the fact that she doesn't do that is more dishonest than you even playing a part that isn't truly you. I don't know how much that applies to real life, by the way. But.
Well, if she is his daughter.
Well, right,
Probably
but he does.
That's an assignment.
Sure. But he appears legitimately upset by what she does.
I think it's important in a kind of thematic echo to point out that his daughter's name is Angel.
Angel,
Nice,
right.
nice.
Very nice.
That's right. Another kind of weird holy component that should manifest itself, as in like the hotel, which is so much also looks like a movie set or a really, or more accurately, a former movie set that's now been lapsed into decrepitude, complete with like broken people littering the ground.
Oh, that's the department store.
Right, the department store, and it's called a Samaritan.
That's the right.
Which
that was
so-
the name of the department store.
I think the father and the daughter scene, now you've kind of explored it in depth. I think it could possibly be a commentary. Is that how you say it? On she's not participating. She's kind of just like watching life, this party happen, and it almost makes me think, taking it out of that context of the scene, like the audience members are watching this movie, and movies enrich our lives, and they kind of maybe give us new perspectives, and we make sense of reality through film sometimes, but how much are we just watching and participating in the real world? Like he's acting, but his acting roles are like he's a participant in the world. He's really out there doing it, and he's saying to his daughter, you didn't participate. You just kind of sat back and watched it. And I think maybe it's taking it out of the film into his commentary on like reality and life. Is that what he's saying to us?
And something I think we haven't really talked much about the action alien
CGI
scene.
I think that was very poignant. Like
what was interesting though, he was like all hardcore doing backflips and running, shooting his gun, but then when he falls, like it's like such a big deal, and then they throw in a woman in there, and then they start going at it, and it's interesting, like how the woman came as soon as he, like after he fell.
I felt like that was almost like a commentary on like maybe the future of cinema, or how he thought it was going, or almost like they were making a video game or something, and he references the past as I think we can safely say that yes, he does that because he includes that naked man, and we know for a fact that was early cinematography. I feel like he's maybe referencing the future with that scene, and how much, you know, it reminds me a bit of the film our group saw with Robin Wright. What was that called?
Oh, The Congress.
The Congress. How she is an actress, but they take like CGI images or whatever, and it doesn't end up being her anymore. You know, I kind of got from that, oh, is this a commentary about the state of film now, where it could be going in the future?
Oh, I'm very much in agreement on that. It's in so many of those details, it has this like a very cynical kind of look at the future, and and all these different elements that film is involved in today. For example, like the true mechanized processing thing. It's not a coincidence that it's such a processing plant. And it's also one of the funnier moments in the movie that he arrives out of the limo dressed in all these glowing ping pong balls. But then later you see him walking on a terrace, and then some other guys are walking on a terrace dressed in the same ridiculous outfit. Like it's all in the day's work for him. And the scene with him firing a gun on a treadmill is wonderfully ironic, because what better way to express the sound and fury signifying nothing and going nowhere.
I felt like that kind of segment was the most accessible to understand to me. I thought it made a lot of sense. It was like, oh right, yeah, he's going to work, he's doing these shots for some movie or video game, and then now it's over, and there's another guy doing the same thing. I think that was, to me, felt very like rational.
Even the dragon and the wizard.
That. I mean, it really did. I feel like that's not so crazy. You see stuff like that now in video games and stuff,
And so, it was actually really, I think it's actually really important for that purpose, because people who watch it initially, and like I know for me, after he had changed from a banker into a old lady begging for change, and then he gets into that outfit. At that moment, I was quite disoriented. But once I saw that, like, you have to go through security by getting your nose hairs authorized. Well, then all these unseen figures are telling him what to do, and all this stuff is being projected onto him and shown behind him. It's like, it got me in the sense, this guy, it's a job that this guy has to do, and some days you have a really, really weird component to it. And one of it reminds me with when the Mr. Merde sequence, the photographer goes and has this interesting moment where he's snapping photos. He goes beauty, 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 and as soon as Merde shows up, he goes weird, 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 and
so
the film
weird.
Right, the film right.
So weird. Exactly. And it's almost like manic, like it's kind of creepy. I'm like,
yes, and the film
so into it. Yeah.
Exactly, the film has this continuous energy of going on this line upon things. Is it beautiful or is it weird?
What I take from it, doesn't that just make sense? Like, to you, unconsciously, it makes sense, but then I think the film allows us to take a step back from what makes sense and think, wait, does this really make sense? Like, does the fact that he bites off the finger, like Mr. Murdy bites off the fingers and then he runs away and the photographer's still snapping, like, does that make sense? Is that, like, humane? Is that what really should be happening? But I feel like we can all relate to that in real life. Stuff like that happens, and with the CGI stuff, like, you take a step back, okay, is that weird? Yeah, it is a bit weird, but it makes so much sense. I think it's very deep. Go ahead.
There are so many parts in the film that do that, and a part that I wanted to talk about that it is really fascinating to me the more I think about it is one of the few times that Mr. Oscar apparently isn't looking at a file of his next appointment. He looks out the window of his limousine and he sees a man in a suit, a man who he calls a banker. He gets out a handgun. He tells his driver to stop the car. He runs across the street, pulls on a ski mask, and the banker, you only see the shot for a second, but because I've seen it 3 times now, it's Oscar playing the banker. He shoots himself in the head, and then he gets shot, collapses by going through the plate glass window. And then when Celine goes up to him, she says, I'm sorry, people, there's been a slight mistake. She whispers to him, and he gets up and walks back to the limo. So what was that? It wasn't an assignment, because he wasn't looking at a file. He tells her to stop the cab. He's shooting himself. I mean,
Just go with
There
it.
is actually I believe I may have a possible solution to your
Okay,
mystery.
go.
I want to hear your solution.
And it's to a detail that I just picked up when I recently saw Holy Motors. If right before that deathbed confessional sequence, he is quoting things, and you're hearing this dramatic music. Then just a moment later, you realize the dramatic music is on a CD that's being played to give the scene some drama. But what he's quoting is lines that he has already said earlier in his different roles. He is trying to get into character.
Wait, where is this out?
This is
Where
right
does this
before the deathbed sequence.
Before he
when
goes,
he sits
'cause he
in bed
walks-
before the
he's in bed for a
participant arrives.
shot before his niece enters
Well,
the...
which is that the scene where he walks? He's in his bathrobe and pajamas and walks up the steps.
That's correct.
Past a hotel desk.
Yes, that's right. And then he gets into He gets into bed, and then he starts. Pardon?
There's a dog in the
Yes.
Yeah,
and
there's
a dog, yes.
which by the way might be the dog that is in the very
Yeah.
beginning.
No, it's not.
It's not.
Two very different dogs.
Yeah, I'm glad because that's too symbolic for me.
Yeah.
But when he's before the niece arrives, he's quoting a series of lines, and those lines are earlier things that he has said in the movie.
Oh.
He's working through the things that he's had to do in this day and maybe even previous days to go get himself into character. Why does he
Very
kill the banker,
interesting.
Jeff? He kills the banker for the same reason that Alec Guinness can't stand Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's a character that gets in his way of doing any role after being Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he's
brilliant.
and sometimes these actors get cursed by being stuck in a particular role, and it's not only that the audience keeps them stuck in that box and won't let them leave. Just like how Jim Carrey for the longest time would have to be wacky, bendable characters. But sometimes it's a blockage for the actor themselves. It resonates with them so much that they literally have to kill their character to massively let them go in order for them to completely change.
I would like to talk about how this film is like a love letter, and I know we've touched on that about how it's a love letter to film. It's the director's like opinions and all of his stuff, but where do you think is the most love?
For me personally, like I've already mentioned, that the interact sequence, the musical interlude, it's the best musical interlude ever put on film. What someone else described it earlier, as a palate cleanser, as a way of refreshing yourself and being able to start over. It's great in terms of just having it put in with an isolated figure and having it continually build to a big production number to show how maybe films are like these personal stories that through the collaboration of many people can become like this rousing chorus. And not only should that have won for Best Song during the Oscars, but the Academy Award should have been introduced that way. How awesome would it have been to have Jonathan Franco come from the back of the Academy playing an accordion, and have Seth Rogen and the rest of that crew like playing an accompaniment, walking down the aisle to approach the Academy stage.
Something about this film, and I'll let you guys get to it, but I just want to say, like, it's for film lovers. Like, I don't know anybody who's like not like really into film that love this movie.
No, I think that's
just because
absolutely right.
and also the more you watch it, the more you appreciate it, which is amazing. And then you just it's just like you keep seeing these like these well thought scenes and just little parts that you just are like, wow, like that's awesome. And that's another reason why I feel like this film is just so full of love for film, because people who really love and appreciate film are just, this film's amazing. So I'll let you guys talk. Yes.
In terms of what you're saying on like the love of film, like it's for whatever Carax thinks of his audience, it's very clear that he knows that they're there. Like in the sequence when the very end where he meets with the family and then the monkeys arrive, I love that moment because
That's his family.
The monkeys are
his family.
Well, the reason that I liked it was because he's had so many different adventures over the course of that day. And he's had so many amazing things had happened. And now he's going to this completely anonymous looking suburban tract, and now he's going to just have this like complete bland evening watching TV with his family. And these are the thoughts that were going into my head. And then the monkey arrives, and it was like, to me, it was a wonderful moment, because that was lead director going, yeah, I see you. I know what you were thinking about this, and I'm just going to give you the image that you think this scene deserves by bringing a monkey to it. And I think that's very cool when you can like watch a film and then literally almost have a director peel open the corner of the screen and go, yeah, I hear you. I know what you feel about this.
I thought that was very warm and fuzzy, that scene. Very comfy home scene. I thought it was a
Great
lovely
song,
way to
too.
end.
The song was delightfully maudlin, yes.
I think the love letter part for me is, I think he references not necessarily directors but genres. Like the whole bit with Kylie Minogue, it's a musical. You know, the bit with the daughter and the dad. Like, I thought that was a story of human interaction, of families. I think we see that a lot in cinema. That personally stuck with me because I like human experience stories about how people connect with each other and relate to each other.
Right.
The CGI bit, I think that was quite, to me, is very explicit, like what it's referencing. And then you have the weird Beauty and the Beast, like kind of almost King Kong, what have you's kind of story. I think it was just, and then almost like the assassin story, the killer, like murderous, like there's so many different genres in it for me. I think that is the love letter.
Yeah,
for me.
Agreed.
Sorry.
Okay.
I had the impression during the murderer sequence is the best Coen Brothers sequence the Coen Brothers have never made. Just these sorts of brutal schemes gone horribly wrong with this really ironic twist, which leads to my favorite ironic moment.
You're talking about the stab.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then they're both lying there
But
looking
it's
the
kind of
same.
like you kind of like anticipate that to happen. I feel like it, once again, it's something that we're like, oh, of course, yeah, he's gonna wake up and he's gonna stab him. Like it makes sense.
Yes,
me.
and in the same way,
because we've seen it before.
yes,
You know?
and in the same way, the CGI sequence to me is like the best David Cronenberg sequence that David Cronenberg never made, because it's all about like the twisting forms of the body and how they can mutate and take some sort of different shape. And Cronenberg's also an expert of showing things with an aesthetic beauty that's also very, very weird.
We did this at the Chinatown discussion, where I wanted everyone to just say one word about like the film, that first thing that came in your head, just one word. Like with Chinatown, I said vintage. So like Holy Motors, I guess I would say beauty. So everybody just say one word. Al.
All right, Interact.
Dream logic.
Poetic.
Neon.
Yeah, like neon. Yeah,
Okay.
neon.
Okay.
I think rich, as in not money, but like rich, as in just so much to it. So.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming for this discussion. I think it went rather well. And
Thank you.
hopefully there'll be another one.
Yes, thank you for organizing it.
Until next time.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Thanks for watching.
Don't you let my baby ride, man. Don't you let my baby ride, man. Don't you let my baby ride, man. Don't you let my baby ride. Don't you let my baby ride, man. Don't you let my baby ride, man. Don't you let my baby ride, man. Don't you let my baby ride.